Everybody. This is Gail Turner Brown. Welcome to the MonetizeU Show, where we share with you how to monetize your skills, your career, your expertise, or your hobbies, and where we are here every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. Once again, my name is Gail Turner Brown. I am a broadcast entrepreneur and your co-host for today. And I am so super excited for today because we have a special guest who will be sharing about podcasting, 3 steps to monetize and grow your business. But before I get to that, 2 things I got for you. Number 1, make sure you grab your pens, your paper, your recording devices, because you do not want to miss this information. And number 2, I want to introduce to you my co-host and partner in success, Mr. R.L. Chance, Mr. best-selling author of Monetize Your Skills. And I'm going to let him take it away so he can give you some more info about you, about him, and the show. So take it away, Mr. Chance.
All right. Thank you very much, Gail. Hey, everybody. Good afternoon. We hope you're ready for another awesome show this afternoon. But first, please make sure you like, comment, share this podcast, right? Go to our Facebook page, MonetizeU Show, and be able to share with that. Today, guys, we have an awesome guest presenter today. Again, my name is Chance, U.S. Navy veteran, author, speaker, and implementation strategist. And so I am super excited, Gail, because podcasting is one of those new medias that we spoke about on a few shows ago when we talk about creative ways to make money online. But our guest today, Mr. Kymone Hinds, is a specialist in this area. And so today, I hope you're ready to learn how to take a podcast to be able to monetize it and grow your business effectively. So with that, I hope everybody welcome to today's show. Again, please make sure you like us on Facebook, share this podcast, share this show today, and anything else you want to do, please go to our website as well, themonetizeushow.com, themonetizeushow.com. That's where you get all the show notes from today's show and also previous shows. You will be able to get everything as well. So Gail, back to you.
All right. So thank you so much, Chance. And as he mentioned, podcasting is one of those areas of new media, along with live broadcasting, that is exploding in this area. And so it is something you definitely want to know about. It's definitely a tool that can be used regardless of what you know. There's so many subjects that people use for podcasting. And so without further ado, I want to introduce to you Mr. Kymone Hinds. He is currently a podcaster, and I've got tons of questions for you, Mr. Kymone. So with that, come on in and tell us some more about you.
Sure. Hey, good afternoon, good day, everyone who's listening to this. Thanks for having me, Chance and Gail. I'm honored to be a part of what you all are doing here to better the lives of people and to help them realize your gifts, your skills, and how they can use those things to bless others and to even achieve income from it.
All right, awesome. So I always like to say, I always start from the beginning because there are people who may be watching this now or on the replay who are like, what's a podcast? Okay, sure. So we're gonna take the baby steps. You know, we say that it takes 3 steps to really start, grow, and build your business. So step number 1, what's a podcast and why should we even be using it?
Sure. You know, I'm glad you asked that. So just as by way of introduction, my day job is I'm a pastor, pastor local church. In that responsibility, I realized I was writing every week, messages and sermons. So I started figuring out that I can take those messages and make them into a book. So now I'm an author, blog, and podcasting was something I started doing maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. A podcast is simply an audio and sometimes video short show that is broadcast over the internet is archived on some media stream, and that people have a chance to go listen and download to whatever device that they can listen to it from. So podcasts have been around for a while. And actually, I was a consumer of podcasts before I started being a producer of podcasts.
Okay,
Awesome,
that makes sense. Go ahead, Chance.
No, I'm saying, by the way, he has the podcast title for his podcast is very interesting. It's called Ideas to Life.
Right.
And I had the privilege actually of being on there a few weeks ago. And so I'm sure as we get to building, I'll share a little bit on how that has even opened up new opportunities for me as well. So anyhow, so Ideas to Life. This is very interesting because through a podcast, you can bring ideas to life.
Sure.
And so Kymone, what are some of the mechanics? So now we know what a podcast is. If someone wants to get started podcasting, like where should they begin?
Okay. Well, let me say this. My first podcast was actually not Ideas to Life. My first podcast was when I got to one of my churches here and we started recording our sermon messages. And I realized, okay, we can try to sell these messages, and anyone who's ever been in a church trying to sell sermons, you recognize how difficult that is, because sometimes the people who want it don't have the funds to get it. And those people who get it are usually people who've heard it before. But I realized there was a way I can set up something on the internet connected to our website where we would put our sermons, and then those sermons would go to iTunes, which is the largest podcasting service around. And so that started where we would just put our sermons online. And believe it or not, there are people who have never come to our church but have heard our sermons. But there are people who have come to our church because they've heard our podcast. Mm-hmm. So that's been a blessing. Well, a few years after that, I serve with an organization that helps to train pastors called PELC, Pastoral Evangelism Leadership Conference. And we started thinking, okay, how can we do more things to equip pastors? So we said, let's do a podcast. At least that was my idea, to do a podcast. What I did not realize is I would be tasked with being the person to host a podcast and to get it set up. You know, there's some things you say, that's a great idea for someone. And you recognize that you are that someone.
Yes.
So to answer your question, I think the first thing I learned early on with podcasting is you need to be professional. You need to have the right tools and equipment in order to get your podcast going. Funny story. I remember my first podcast interview that I did for PELC. I did it using just my computer. I didn't have a microphone, and I was recording an interview with someone. And if I tell you this, it was probably the best interview I ever did, at least at the time. It was really good. It was such good information. And then when we put it up there to be listened to, the audio was horrible. And I learned an important lesson, that you can have the best content, but if the audio system that you're using is not good, people aren't going to listen to it. So we actually had to re-record that interview. Oh, and so it made me learn, first of all, that you need to have a good microphone. You have to invest. If you're going to do a podcast, don't try to do it like me at first on the cheap. Get a microphone. And so I actually bought a microphone. I don't know if this is going to be visible. I have it on screen here at Audio Technica. But honestly, recommending microphones is probably not something that you need. Everyone can just Google and find out what's a good microphone that fits their system. And I would recommend anyone hosting a podcast, you need to have something to capture your voice that is professional and that you can connect it to your computer so that you can record your podcast.
That is definitely good to know. And let me tell you guys, when I first met Kymone, the first thing I said was, oh my God, you have a great voice. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's got like a magnificent voice. But I have heard before, especially when it comes to podcasting, I don't necessarily think it is so much the case when you're doing a live video broadcast. But it seems like when it comes to podcasting, it's like I've heard someone say people will not forgive you if you've got really bad audio. I guess because that's the only thing that they really tuned into. Mm-hmm. So it's got to be clear.
And you have to think about the times that people are listening to podcasts are not usually dedicated times. They are not sitting down listening to podcasts. They are exercising. They are driving in their car sometimes. They're doing chores around the home. And so you're already competing for their attention with something else that's happening. So you need to make sure that what they are hearing through their headphones or through their whatever amplification they're using is clear, doesn't have blips in it, and so that they are not distracted to frustrations till the point that they go, I'm going to turn this off.
Yeah. Now, I think also you said when it comes to the mic, you don't want to, folks can find their own out there, but it's good to at least, give them something. Because if you're a podcaster, you're using something that works, so your audio is good. So we know the Audio Technica there. I think the Rode Podcaster, I see some folks using that as well.
The Audio Technica is what I've used. I've been using it for 3 years, and it's worked well. And awesome. I'm sure they have better ones that have come out. But at least if you want one that's worked for me, the Audio Technica microphone works well for me.
Yeah, and just YouTube it. YouTube has good comparisons between different mics for podcasting. Yeah. Just type in podcasting mic, or go to Amazon and type in that as well. Yeah. But like I said, the Blue Yeti is one that I see a lot of folks using. I use the Blue Yeti and also the Rode Podcaster. So those are three right there. So just go ahead online and type in, see some comparisons, whichever work. But get started. Even if you got to make mistakes sometimes. I know it's not good. But hey, sometimes we all have to learn those lessons as we build, right, Gail?
That's exactly right. And in fact, that's the whole point of doing a lot of this. We are trying to bring to you an array of platforms that people can use and are using, because the main thing we want is for you to get started. Just do something. And so let me tell you, and I know this for sure, for the ladies who are like, I don't want to be on camera, podcasting. Yeah, you're right. You don't have to be on camera for podcasting. Yeah. So this way you ain't got to get made up and do all this stuff. Get your message out there, because we know you guys have something to say. Yeah. So that's where podcasting can come in, because there are people who are really, really shy about, people seeing them. Yeah. But they're not shy about telling you what they think or providing advice or whatever content. So that's true. So that's the other part also. Yeah, that's true. When I like the idea that one of the reasons you started was because you're a pastor, people want to hear your message. What's a good way, in your opinion, for people who may not have any idea what they want to podcast about? What's a good way for them to begin to research what people want to hear about, what topics or content that people want to know about?
Good one.
Well, it's interesting. I would say for anyone who is thinking about starting their own podcast, it's a good idea to start listening to podcasts. Because by listening, you begin to realize what you're interested in, what you begin to, because podcasting, it's a world out there. If you go to iTunes, you begin listening to people in business. Some people are in family. Some people are in, human services. And so you begin listening, you begin to realize, I'm interested in this. Now, the trap that we can fall into is we can think, well, someone else is doing it, so I don't need to. But I think it's very interesting that as many podcasts as there are on entrepreneurship, people still listen to mine because I have a unique way of telling the story. And as many podcasts as there are on pastoral leadership, people still listen to the Pelt podcast because we have a unique perspective to bring. But I will say, start with listening to other people's podcasts to realize, okay, what lane do I want to go in? What interests me and I'm passionate about? And you may even realize as you listen, hey, I have a perspective to add, or I have something to add to this discussion that's going on here.
That reminds me of my good friend, our producer here, Curtis, talking about telling your story, right? Because that's why he's so interested in video. I think it's similar in the sense of with a podcast, what I'm hearing Kymone is saying, you can control your message and you can get your message out there, similar as video as well. So if you don't tell your story, your message, your way of delivering this content. People want to hear from you. And I guess it goes back also to believing in yourself, knowing that what you have is valuable and people want to hear it. Just put it out there. Like I said, do your homework, of course, but that's why this show is about monetize you again. So figure out what you love. What are your giftings? What are your expertise? What can you share about? Because coming from you, you talk about, especially in the business space, I mean, you have different people that talk about getting out of debt. You have Dave Ramsey, you have Robert Kiyosaki, you have all different frame of references and people coming with their perspective. But you, to me, I see it as we have a service to give to the world.
That's right.
And if we hold our talents and gifts in, somebody would miss out on the information that they can only resonate with you.
Yeah. As you mentioned that, I think I would add that everyone talks about a core message. I've been learning this concept, and I realized that I've had a core message, but I may not have defined it. But I would suggest to someone starting a podcast that you would probably want to do better than I did. Find your core message before. And then you have to figure out the second step after that as you begin your podcast. This is not the technical stuff. This is just understanding the message of it. You have to figure out what is your personality that you want to bring to your podcast. Because I've realized different podcasts have different personalities. So, for instance, Dave Ramsey, you mentioned, his personality on his radio show and his podcast is the sage. The sage is the person who is wise. I have ideas. I have advice. I have life experience. I have knowledge that I've learned throughout my education. So when you call me or when someone is on my podcast or listens to that, I am dispensing advice. I take the position of someone either who is further along in the journey, someone who has been educated in this, someone who has learned through the school of hard knocks. So I'm going to give you advice. That's the sage. And for some people, that's the personality you want to take in your podcast. You want to be the sage. I've learned something. Now let me share with you.
Wow.
So
I wonder what would Gail
be. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just saying, I wonder what Gail would be. So what's the next one? Sage, what else?
Yeah, let me tell you the others. At least that I found. There would be what you call the student. The student in a podcast would be someone who would bring other people on and take the position of asking questions. Tell me how. Now, of course, the student has some knowledge of the subject matter. As you know, you need some basic knowledge in order to ask questions, but the student comes on board and they ask questions. They are probing. They're helping to bring out of the people who would come on their show as a guest, information so that their listeners can benefit from it. And the student is one personality. So you have the sage, and sometimes the sage might have a podcast all by themselves. They don't have a guest on there. The student many times will have, featured guests where they ask questions. And then I think there are probably two other personalities I've seen. One would be the struggler. And none of these are better than the other. It's just a difference. A struggler is someone who has a problem and shares from the problem that other people might also identify with. They may be going through something or talking about a challenge they have, raising teenagers. Isn't it difficult in our world raising teenagers? Let me tell you about one of the challenges I had with my teenagers this week. I asked them to not be on their telephones after a certain time, and I went to their room. And man, isn't it difficult when we have that? And people identify with strugglers because, can we agree, we all struggle. Yeah. And so strugglers that's one other personality you might take on a podcast. And the last would be the sidekick. And the sidekick is simply, some podcasts would have two people on there, and you have someone who plays the role of lightening the mood, interjecting, making sure, because some people are really, especially if you have someone who is a sage, they're really tightly wound and they want to get information out there. And you need people to just give it a break in the middle just to say, hey, let's breathe, let's enjoy this podcast. So now that I've given you all those, who do you think you might be?
Okay. I'm the last one. Okay.
Beyond the shadow of a doubt.
I was waiting to get to that. Okay. I didn't know. I was like, okay, come on, waiting to find me in this group. Yeah. That's me. Okay. That's me.
And the sage, you got some sage in you as well, but I think more of the last one, but definitely some sage as well.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm old enough. I should have a little bit of sage, but yeah, I do. I like having fun. Okay, I mean, I just do. I'm a lot more. I just do. I like free flowing. I like for it to be loose. Yeah. So they, the guys keep me in line a little bit.
Let me tell you though, I have a buddy of mine. His name is Peyton Jones. Peyton runs. He runs 2 podcasts, at least 2. One is the #1 podcast for church planters. Number 2 is, I think, the #2 podcast for church planters. Go figure. So Peyton's podcast, he has on there a friend of his called Pete Mitchell. And their podcast is much longer than my episodes. They're like an hour and a half long. So you would think, wow, okay, for podcasters, they're getting on there, they're getting a lot of meaty information. The first 20 minutes or so, they are just bantering about anything. It's like Seinfeld, a show about nothing. But the reason why they're popular is they recognize people who work in a church plant environment already deal with a lot of stress. And so their, sidekick, just laugh, joke, kind of create something where people feel like, okay, I'm going to get some information, but I'm going to feel much better getting that information by the end.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
I like that. That's good.
So that means everybody can really have a podcast per se if they really wanted to in their business. Because, or even team up, you might be, like you said, different times you switch role. I think I'm a little bit of student and sage in the sense of, I like to ask questions, like to interview people because I want to figure out what's working. So, but like Gail and I mean, I think Gail brings that flavor in the sense of, you're right, making it lighter, making it, so it's not just content. So you can team up also with somebody like that.
Absolutely.
Or when you bring on people on the show that, like you said, the guest will be probably one of those 4 personalities. So that way you're also getting a blend right there.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. No, that's one of the keys. I'm glad that Chance brought that up, because what people have a tendency to do, and I think you mentioned it, Kymone, earlier. You begin to think about all the things you don't have, all the things that you lack. I don't have a message. I don't have a core this. I don't have this or that, right? Well, one of the things that I did was, because I work better with other people because I get my energy from other people, and hopefully I give some energy to people. And so and like, just like Chance, there are a lot of things that I want to know. So one area that people can do is to use the interview style. And so this way, regardless to what you may not know anything. I know of a gentleman, he's a 7-figure earner. And I remember him telling this story that he wanted to learn fly fishing. He didn't know anything about fly fishing. And so he wanted to know how to do that. And what he did was he went out and he found an expert in that area, and he interviewed that expert. And I know he wrote a book about it. He created like this whole business around fly fishing. A subject he knew nothing about, but he just had an interest in it. That's interesting. Yeah. And so I'm glad that you mentioned it, so that this way people who are hearing this, is like, don't worry about if what you believe you lack. There's always someone out there that is an expert and can convey what you don't have. You just bring the 2 things together. Bring your part, interview. Think about people like Larry King.
Good example.
He don't know nothing. I mean, not that he doesn't know anything, but his entire career, he was a radio host, and then he was a scene, and all he did was interview.
That's right. Ask questions. Be a good learner.
Yeah. Right. He was a good listener and a good asker of questions. And he's like a multi-bazillionaire, right? And so that's how you oftentimes have to look at this when you are looking at, how do I do this? What do I do? You just use that model.
Awesome.
Now, let me, before I forget, give you some little nuts and bolts. I mentioned getting a microphone. You'd also have to have a hosting service. Early on, I learned the value of a hosting service. So there are some options that I want to present to our listeners. One is Buzzsprout. That's what I use.
Okay, say it again.
Buzzsprout, Buzz Sprout, SPROUT.com is a podcast hosting service. Now you can host a podcast on most websites. So your WordPress and your different sites, Squarespace, etc., will have a podcast plugin where it will connect you to iTunes and others. But your hosting service, what I learned the value of a Buzzsprout is it gives you something called metrics on the other side that you can begin to know who's listening to this. And these hosting services also help to feed your podcast to the places where people get it. So most people will not come to your website to hear your podcast. Most people are going to hear your podcast on an iTunes. They will hear it on Google Play. They will hear it on Stitcher, and they'll even hear it on one that I just lost, and I'll remember it. But Buzzsprout is one that I use, and then other people use some other hosting services for your podcast. But that's something that your listeners want to get that. Get a hosting service. They're going to make you pay a little something for it, but it's money worth it because you're able to go back and see who's listening to it, those kind of things. Those are some nuts and bolts. And then some other things I want to share with you on just what would be some good best practices for that. But having a hosting service is definitely something you want to do to make sure that people can download your podcast.
Awesome. All right, good folks. Today you're hearing on the MonetizeU Show how to take your podcast and monetize it, but also to grow your business. And so we have our expert featured guest today, Mr. Kymone Hinds from Ideas to Life podcast. You can catch him online at KymoneHinds.com. So before we get into that part of monetization, because you just mentioned that some of these hosting places might cost a little money. And of course, we expect that. But folks want to also know, how do I make money with a podcast as well? So that's coming right up, guys. So make sure you stay tuned. Gail, can you give us a little interjection here, though? We see you actually wearing some accessories there, and so you're looking good on camera. So we just want some of the folks who might be watching you wondering, hey, what you got on your head there? If you got any other tools, can you tell them about your gears? And then we get right back to Kymone in some best practices for podcasting and how to monetize your podcast.
Yes. So yes, we want to let people know that the MonetizeU Show, we have gear, we have swag for you. So I am modeling today my this is called a golf cap. I have a golf cap. We also have the MonetizeU mug filled with coffee and tea. And do I have hot chocolate in here? No, I do not. So this is totally filled already, with some really great stuff. So if you guys you can definitely pick this up. Go to our page, the MonetizeUShow.com. And I have a t-shirt. I would stand up, but then you just see my boobs. So here we go. I'm sorry. I do what I do. So, but we also have a t-shirt. So you can get t-shirt, you can get hat, you can get a mug. And I shared this last week, but you guys, you got to go and you got to let me know, because I can show you how you can get this mug for free $99, but you got to go to the page and put in, show me how to get it for free $99. That's how that goes. So that's it for that commercial break. And I will send it back to you, Mr. Chance, because I want to hear Mr. Kymone talk about the best practices. I also want to know, I know you talked a little bit about money, and I want to get an idea of what an overall investment would be to launch a podcast. So
awesome. Well, as a leading, Kymone, you're the expert. So, but as a leading, you mentioned a while ago, one of these guys, their podcast is like an hour and a half. So starting with that, what's the average length, or how long should someone, especially starting out, maybe how long should they aim for in their podcast?
I would say I would aim for 20 to 30 minutes. And you got some grace beyond 30. But you have to be really good for someone to listen to something for an hour. I think it's a mental thing. Because I can find 20 minutes, I can find 30 minutes in my day. Because that's a workout routine for some people. That's a drive to work for some people. But when it starts becoming 50, 45, 50 minutes, people have to begin thinking, I'll have to watch, I'll only be able to get through half of this. So it's a mental thing. Even when people look at the length of the podcast, they're able to say, okay, I can get all of this. And the good thing with podcasting, you can always chop it up into 2 shows if something is too long. So you tell people, come back for the second show.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah. That's good. I like that too. Yeah.
Okay. So what are some other best practices there? Now you mentioned, hold on there, with the time effort there too, but that's why some of the places you host give you metrics. Do they track, for example, on YouTube, right? You can check your metrics to see how long or what's the average length of time that people are watching your videos. So maybe that can help gauge people. Maybe you start out with 20, or let's say you were doing an hour and you see people are listening to it. Maybe you might want to keep it.
Sure.
But if you can kind of see what's the average length of time that people are listening, maybe adjust downwards.
That's right. You have some of those metrics as well. And the other hosting that I wanted to mention is SoundCloud. Many people are familiar with SoundCloud. That's one of those places you can almost be a viral, you can get your music following. People were using SoundCloud for that. And now SoundCloud is a place where you can host your podcast and it will push it out to iTunes and the other podcast host sources that people will usually go get them, podcast markets.
Okay.
Yeah. I learned early on that one of the things with a podcast, just like your show, is that people value something that seems professional. I'm gonna give you a theory here that a friend gave me. People don't know how big or how small you are until you tell them.
That's true.
Right? And so presentation matters. And so early on with my podcast and the podcast I did for Pelt, we had something called an intro and an outro, something that will welcome people to the show. Introduce the host, something that at the end of it told them where to go for more information, go to our website, or something that pointed them somewhere else.
Right.
And I think it's important. Now, some people I've seen, they don't have an intro done by someone. I actually paid someone to do a voiceover of my intro, but they have music that comes on every time, that they play every time, and they welcome people in an upbeat manner. And I think that's a good trick of the trade for a podcast, that people shouldn't just tune in and just hear you talking. There should be something that gives them that feel, because they are accustomed to television. They're accustomed to radio that have intros. So a podcast for them needs to have that similar quality of intro and outro.
Okay, that's
well taken.
So when someone starts a podcast, because I heard you talked about hosting, you talked about equipment, even the intro, outro, you said you had someone to do it. What kind of investment?
That's a good point. Yeah.
Because the first time I ever heard about podcasting, I was left with the belief that it wasn't going to cost me anything. It was like, hey, iTunes is free. This is free. This is free. And then to start investigating, I'm like, wait a minute, hold it. So we want to make sure that people have the goods right off the bat. And so what kind of investment does a good podcast have? Sure.
Well, I'll say a microphone, which I mentioned before, can probably cost you about $70, or it can cost you a little bit less than that. The hosting that I pay for on Buzzsprout, well, first of all, Buzzsprout does have a free amount, and it will let you have certain amount of episodes for free. But after you get past 6, you have to start losing episodes. And I didn't want my episodes to disappear, so I think I pay about $20 a month for hosting. And then the intro and the outro, that probably now, and after talking to Chance and some of those guys, I'm realizing I could have done that myself. And maybe that's another field that I could go into, doing people's intros and outros. But I paid someone maybe about $40 to do that because this guy had a good voice. He knew how to mix stuff together. But some of those things, if you don't want to do it for yourself, there's different places like even Fiverr and others that you can outsource stuff to. But there's some things you can do yourself until you get your following go up a little bit.
But the good thing too about that, Kymone, though, is not some of these costs are not always. For example, like once you do the intro and outro, it's a one-time cost.
It is.
Until, of course, you might want to revamp. Similar to a logo, you're going to need a logo. They have their own specs. But with that, that's also a one-time cost. Right. Well, I mean, pretty much everybody understand those too, because to do your own business, you have to do those little things. But still, I mean, intro, outro sounds like it's less than $100. That's not too bad.
Way less, yeah.
And so the monthly hosting, again, if it's going to be a business to bring in revenue, which we're going to talk about in a moment, then we can see the trade-off as well. Because if it is something you can do your website with it, like how you have yours, I like your setup because you can do your blogging with that too. So it's kind of all ties into each other ish, any other kind of course that other folks should be looking at. So we have the, what is it? The mic we need good sound. We need a host in place. Right. We need a logo. And we probably need, not probably, best practice, we need an intro and an outro. Anything else you can think of?
Well, most times when you're finished with the audio, you do a little bit of mixing. But those programs are usually on your computer already or free. If you're a Macintosh person, it is GarageBand. If you're a PC, Microsoft person, I think it's called Audacity. So those programs, you do a little bit of mixing. Now, some people might think that's a little. I'm getting technical now. Yeah. If you are that person saying this is getting a little technical, I guarantee you, a younger person who would not mind doing a little bit of mixing on the stuff that you send them. At first, when I was doing my podcast with Pelk, I would send the file to someone and he would do all the mixing. I started doing it for myself. Now my teenagers are getting to the point where I'm going to be giving them some of that work to do. Because they're playing with the computer all the time. You might as well get something meaningful out of your time.
That is absolutely right. I'm like, if you on it, then it needs to pay for itself. So let's go get it.
Right on.
So, and with that being said, can we talk about the money? Because that's what we are here to do. So we know that you can start a podcast on many different subjects. It doesn't have to all be only about you. If you don't know how to do something, you can partner with someone. We know we need to have good audio. We need to have a hosting. We need an intro and outro. You can either do it yourself because you have a fabulous voice, or you can hire somebody to do it. Maybe they'll hire you to do that. But bottom line is that you can get that done. So we got our subject, we got our tech together. We know where we're gonna host it. Okay, now I'm ready to go. Make me some money. What do I need to do?
All right. So I think you're ready to go. I think the step that I will tell people you need to do with your podcast, you need to publicize it. It's that whole tree falls in the forest, no one hears it, doesn't make a sound. You have a podcast, no one knows it's there. Does it benefit anyone? Because that's what you really start with. And will I be able to benefit from that podcast if no one knows I'm doing it? So it's very important. iTunes, as I mentioned, is the biggest podcasting market. They have something called new and noteworthy of the first 8 weeks of your podcast being on the iTunes store is when it's available to be pushed into a visibility where people who would not ordinarily see your stuff. It begins to rise into their view where they say, okay, what's a new and noteworthy podcast in my field of interest? Okay. So those first 8 weeks for a podcast are very important, that you make sure you're getting your listenership up and your downloads up. And it's something that you understand in any field, that you have to ask people to do something when you listen to your podcast. You want to tell them, subscribe. You want to tell them to share. You want to tell them to download. Subscribe, which allows them to download the next one. Whenever it comes out, they'll get it. You want to tell them to share it with someone else. And you also want to provide some sort of interaction, send questions. Because if someone sends a question, chances are they'll want to listen next week. But those first few weeks are very important. And so I would even say, if you have a following already, you want to begin to let people know, I have a podcast coming up. It's going to launch at this time. Listen to it. Because every person who listens to it begins to build your metrics and helps you to rise in visibility in the iTunes store.
Awesome, man.
Make sure you share whenever you do a podcast. Listen, if it's something that you believe in, share that thing on all your social media. Share it with people who you have contact with. Make sure it gets out there by your newsletter, your tribe, whoever is you're following. Make sure people know I have a podcast that's coming out. And someone even said one of the wonderful things now is people will more gravitate to a graphic than they would to just words. Yeah. Make sure you have a good logo for your podcast and put that thing on the social medias that have pictures. So that would be your Instagram, that would be your Pinterest, that would be even Facebook. But make sure you're driving people back to the link so they go listen. So you want to make sure in those first few weeks you're getting some good traction. You're telling people to subscribe. Listen, even if you're family members, you're telling them, listen, I have a podcast, because their listenership is going to raise your metrics and allow iTunes to boost you in their new and noteworthy. Yeah.
That sounds like very sage advice. So you are the sage.
Yeah.
So what are the ways that people can start generating money from this?
Okay.
How do people make money?
Yeah. So far I've talked about being professional. I've talked about what your personality is. I've talked about publicizing it. Just want to talk 2 more steps. And I think the last one will lead you into what people really want to hear, the dollars.
Right.
So,
okay.
If you're going to do a podcast, you need to have a plan. No one wants to subscribe to something that is going to come out whenever it comes out. You need to know my podcast comes out every Tuesday. You're gonna get that podcast, so people can depend on it. Because when people begin depending on it, you begin getting popular. You begin getting known. That kind of stuff. Then you want to have consistent content. So you want to know what lane are you in. You don't want to have folks just all over. You talk about the NBA one week, you talk about cooking the next week. Unless you find a way to tie those two things in, you want to make sure, okay, this is consistent content. I've learned things in series tend to help. So I'm doing a series on this, doing a series on young entrepreneurs, audience interaction. And then here's the steps that now you begin to figure out, okay, here's how I make a payoff from my podcast. Here's a payoff. The first thing I want to say is not every payoff on a podcast comes in direct money. I've had payoffs in my podcast from connections with people that I never would have met. There's some people, there's a lady who I've connected with who was the producer for the Tom Joyner morning show. Now, yeah, I see your reaction. And for those who might just listen to this, Gail is surprised. And I'm surprised. But I interviewed someone on my podcast. They shared the interview. This lady, her name is Nikki. Nikki heard it and said, wow, that was great. And my response to her was, I'd love to have you on my show. Her response was, anytime.
Wow, come on now.
Her number. And I'm, you don't want to sound starstruck, but you are a little bit. And you kind of just understand that having a podcast gives you credibility with people. And so there are connections I've made that have benefited me with writing my book, getting it out there, with establishing some other things like coaching. My connection with Chance even is through a podcast. And so one of the first payoffs of a podcast, it gives you connections and networking, but it also gives you some credibility that, hey, you are, even if you take the role of a student, you have some expertise in this because you've been interviewing people on this subject for a while.
Yeah.
the second payoff, I'll say, and maybe I'll just pause there to see if there are any questions.
No, I mean that's perfect. I mean, that's the same way too of growing the business, you know. So you're monetizing, but you also, that's a form of growing your business and your platform when you start getting that kind of interaction. So yeah, man, you're on point.
The second thing I'll say is another payoff is podcasts are content that you can repurpose. So the podcast interviews that I've done, I realized after a while, people were saying such great things that there's something called show notes. Show notes is where you go back and you kind of take down the points that were said, whether if it's two people are sharing, one is just a co-host situation. If you're sharing alone, or if you're interviewing someone, you get some show notes and you put that, and what that becomes is a blog. All right. So you get the content from a podcast, it becomes a blog. But pretty soon that can become a speech. Pretty soon that can become a training. And I want to tell you, the podcast, after I did my first year of podcast, I recognized something. I have been interviewing people who are entrepreneurs, people who were social entrepreneurs, which is something I learned of, they started a business to help others, interview pastors. And I have material for a book, which will be launched very soon. Come on now. So that's a payoff from this podcast, that I took the position of a learner, but I've learned so much that I can now put together from blogs, from podcast interviews. That will be a book that now becomes something that I can sell and I can monetize that. And what's wonderful, people have been listening to my podcast. So I now have a platform to advertise a book on something that I have been, really sharing with them and allowing them to get free information from for a while.
Now you're talking our language there, man.
Yeah.
Come on now.
That's what I was going to say, man. That is like, so we love repurposing. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. Do it once and then use it in multiple ways.
Yeah.
So, and I hadn't thought about, honestly, because again, this particular platform, I know about it. I've listened to podcasts before, but I've never created one before. Mm-hmm. And so, but I saw the show notes, but I didn't even think about that. Mm-hmm. That those are now your blog posts. I'm sure that also means they can be your Twitter post and they can be your Facebook post. They're your blog posts. Pieces of it can go into your newsletter.
Yeah.
So that's also a way to be everywhere. Yeah. You do the content once, but now you are in multiple places.
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. So, and that's also wonderful. You a blog, because I've seen people do one thing. This one lady I was listening to last week, she wrote a book, she made it blogs, she made a podcast off of it, made social media posts. Well, you can go different ways. You can start with a blog that start with a podcast, it becomes a blog that you shoot out into your newsletter, that a social media post, become a book and a course and some training afterward. So there's some definite payoffs for podcasts without people even sending you money for your podcast.
Man.
Right. Yeah. So you have direct, indirect.
Yeah.
Yeah. So about like sponsorship, some guys are here do sponsorship in between somewhere like that too.
Right. So now the other part of this is as podcasts develop, what happens is you begin being in a particular lane. And in that lane, there are definitely some natural partnerships. If I'm doing a podcast talking about hair products and natural hair, because natural hair is in.
Oh yeah, that's
natural
big.
hair is in. So can you imagine if you're doing a podcast on how to do your hair naturally in different styles and blah, you understand much more than
I want to know how you do your hair.
Right. So yeah, that's it. That's called.
You're right.
That's the title. So how you do your hair. Right. That's the podcast title. Well, after a while, and you're getting that listenership up, you can make a partnership with someone who produces products for natural hair. Say, I would like you to sponsor a segment on my show. Now, again, you are able to bring the metrics. I have 1,000 unique downloads for every show. This is people who are interested in this, and you being able to share your product allows you to have access to those 1,000 people every time I bring out my show, which comes out every week on a Tuesday, and you tell them all the professional things. Well, just doing that, you can definitely find some partnerships. And if you can have multiple sponsors. You can have a big sponsor that will sponsor the whole show, or you can have just multiples that sponsor different segments of your show.
Man, awesome.
Now,
it's so interesting. Good. In terms of sponsorship, a friend of mine recently told me about something called, we're familiar with crowdfunding.
Yes.
People doing small amounts of money to help you to sponsor something. There is actually a thing called Podcast Patron that you can advertise your podcast on there and say, I'm looking for people to help sponsor my podcast. Because as you mentioned, there are expenses. There is my monthly hosting. Mm-hmm. There is the equipment I get. There's some other things. Maybe you just other things. Maybe you're traveling to go interview some of your guests if you want to do that. If you want to get really big. Well, this is some expenses, and I'm looking for people to do it. Well, here's what I've learned in that whole realm. Maybe there's no one out there who is a stranger to you who might just invest in your podcast. Maybe there isn't. Maybe there isn't. And there's a chance there is, but maybe there isn't. But you can put that out to people who are friends and family, and they can pledge, I'm going to give $2 a month to your podcast. Well, $2 a month adds up to be able to get the investment to take care of the monthly costs. But if I'm paying a dime towards your podcast, what does that make me? I'm invested in this. So I want to listen to this.
Yes.
So anyone who you get who invests actually becomes not just someone who listens, but then they begin becoming a promoter because I'm a sponsor of this.
Right.
I'm invested in this. The example someone gave me is, think about political parties. They'll give you a yard sign. The yard sign is not for your neighbors. It's for you. If you put that yard sign in your yard, you're going to vote for that person.
Right.
If I am investing even $2 in a podcast per month that comes out of my account, I'm going to listen to it. I'm going to share it. I'm going to make sure I am a promoter and a supporter of that podcast.
Wow.
I never thought of that.
Yeah. So podcast.
Never thought of that.
Yeah.
Man, there's so many possibilities. I'm telling you. So I'm hoping folks are listening, especially if you have a business. And the good thing about this too, some people already have businesses. So that means if you are not doing a podcast, it's good because you now, when you start, you already have an audience, right? All your customers now become an audience. When they come in, hey, by the way, we just started a new podcast. Mm-hmm. And now you can monetize them even in different ways because first of all, they were not in tune with you in this regard, but now you just open up a whole new world to them. And because they're already faithful or loyal customers, they will want to, of course, listen to, hey, what you got to say. Yeah. So, man, this has been enlightening, man. This is powerful.
Yeah, this is really, really good. And we are, I'm telling you that it doesn't take long for that time to go by because we're almost at the top of the hour.
Yeah. I will say for people who are even thinking about a podcast, you may not make the money, right? Just, where you're seeing it coming in through sponsorships. But when you are helping people, when people are looking for someone to pay, they'll look for the person who helped them.
Yeah,
that's right.
You build just that loyalty, you build goodwill. People say, okay, I've been listening to this guy talk about how to plan weddings and how to organize my wedding. Well, I'm looking for a wedding coordinator. Who do you think I'm going to call?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
mm-hmm.
That is so true. Oh my God,
Wow.
That's right. Yeah.
But the indirect is many ways because as far as growing your business as well, for example, I was on John Lee Dumas's podcast. When is that? June. There's this gentleman who heard that, who reached out to me. Mm-hmm. His name is Jeff Bogasic. He runs another podcast as well called Mind for Life, right? Mind for Life. And not only that, but he just wrote a blog post for me as a featured guest. So that's a blog post that I didn't have to write. And it was well done, over 1,200 words. So it wasn't like that. I could make 4 blogs out of that.
Yeah.
So little things like that. So that's growing my audience because I'm leveraging myself by going on other people's podcasts. They're leveraging themselves by getting exposure also with me. And I allow him, of course, to put his stuff on my site because, hey, I was on there. So it's like reciprocation,
It's
right?
exactly.
Then I went to Kymone's podcast not too long ago. Right after that show, I had a prominent pastor also called Mia, right, was asking question about my services. And then Kymone and I think last week or week before, we did a webinar, right? So you see how that can lead to different businesses or different ventures. And I'm glad to see also from that podcast, we talk about, from that webinar, we talked about writing books and stuff like that. Now I see like 3 of them who on that podcast who on that webinar got their books out there, ebook out there already. So this is amazing. So it just grows. More people get to hear you. So that's the growing your business part. So monetization plus the growth can happen simultaneously.
Right. And there are people out there who have this huge fear of being salesy. It's kind of counterproductive because it's like, I want to have a business, which means you got to make money, but they have a fear of selling. And so in doing this the way that you're talking about, you're getting the exposure. People are coming to you. They're reaching out. Hey, will you be on my podcast? Can I do a blog about you? So on and so forth. Now you're drawing people to you. So you don't have to do hardcore sales. You don't have to do any of that because people are now coming to you and they're getting to know you from seeing you on various platforms that they're participating in. So it's not a huge deal when you say, hey, buy my stuff.
Yeah.
Or whatever, whatever the case may be.
Because you added value to them.
Right.
Exactly, because you've provided value. So that's really good. I honestly, I thought that you were going to say something totally different than what you said in terms of the monetization part. And so I'm really glad to learn what you just said. And I'm hoping the other people will kind of get it too, so that they understand it doesn't have to be hardcore sales. It doesn't have to be hard, period. It becomes like just an extension of what you already know or have a passion about.
There you go.
That's it. That's all that it is. So it's like, people relax. Relax. Use these tools. Connect with Kymone. Kymone, please tell us again the name of your podcast. And when you do it, so that we can, and obviously if people go on and they download it, they'll get a notification, right? When you come on.
Yeah.
So talk about that.
The name of my podcast is Ideas to Life. That's where we believe that we can help you work what you're working with. That's what Ideas to Life is all about. And so you can go to iTunes and put in Ideas to Life. You can go to Google Play, put it in, you'll find us. You can go to Stitcher, you'll find us on there as well. And finally, you can go to on whatever device or whatever market you're in, you can find it there.
Awesome.
Well,
for our movers and shakers out there as well, if you're watching, please go check out Kymone's stuff. And hey, if you got something you're doing that's, radical and so forth, you might be a future guest on his show as well. Reach out to him. Hey,
hint. Yeah. Oh, my email's there. Just go ahead and hit me an email. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Thank you for coming on today, brother. I learned a lot, man. I appreciate it. And we wish you nothing but success and blessings on your new book and everything that's coming out. Gail?
Thank you.
Yes, I love it. Thank you so, so much, Kymone. I learned a lot because yes, you're right. I am definitely a student. And so I learned a ton. And actually a lot of the advice you gave is very similar to for the live video broadcasting, building that type of
Sure.
audience. So for people who are listening, if they may have a podcast and was wondering about, how do I do a show? How do I do a video? Some of it is exactly the same way. It's just get your message out. Just get your message out. Get off the struggle bus and just get it out there. That's what you have to do.
Awesome.
So I wanted once again I thank Kymone. Thank you guys for sharing, for coming, for listening, for people who are here now, for people who will see it in the replay. I always want to give a special shout out to what is it? For whom that is not seen, Mr. MC Curtis. He is from Curtis Brooks Media. He is the producer of our show. He is the wizard in the back that makes all the technical stuff take place. So for a lot of you who are wondering, how do I do a show? I can't do this. You don't even have to worry about it. We got you. Okay. We got you because he can make you look good and sound good and be professional like he does with us. So with that being said, make sure to tune in next Tuesday at 3 for another episode of the MonetizeU Show. And if you if you have any suggestions, ideas, concepts that you'd like for us to go over, you are struggling with something you're curious about, you're wondering, can I do this with my business? Drop us a note, put the information in there so that we can respond to you, because we definitely will respond to that. And also some of the information that Kymone mentioned in terms of the equipment, some of the suggestions he gave, that will be, I think, as Chance mentioned, in our show notes. You can go to our website, which is the MonetizeU.com, the MonetizeShow.com. The MonetizeUShow.com. I'm going to get it right. The MonetizeUShow.com. That'll be there as well as on our page. You can do that. So, Mr. Chance, do you have any last words while we roll this on out?
No, I'm good. Thank you guys for coming today, man. Go out there and monetize your skills. If there's anything we can do, let us know. But we appreciate Kymone today. Do go check out his website, KymoneHinds.com. Have a blessed day, everybody.
Awesome. So see, you can monetize it.
I love it.
Peace out, guys. Thank you, Kymone.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.